Now, dear listener, you know I've talked to you a lot on the Politicrat Daily podcast about making your own podcast. And let me tell you something, Anchor gives you the best opportunity to do that. It's free of charge. Yes, it's free. And there are lots of creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your own phone or computer. How about that? And you can even add songs to your podcast from Spotify. It's really wonderful. You can do this, and it really is very easy. And Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you. It can be heard on all kinds of platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make some money too. And money making is a good thing. It's everything you need in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Friday, May the 21st, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, what's news? A look at some of the news stories that may have escaped my radar and yours. Coming up next. Welcome back. I couldn't resist. That was Jaws, the main theme from Jaws, composed by John Williams, who, my goodness me, he's composed a quadrillion movie scores, and pretty much all of them have been absolutely brilliant. I mean, he's won a, God knows, ton of Oscars, but again, he is one of the greats in movie composing. Although I don't think he's the best composer. I think that there are people who have passed, like Ennio Morricone, James Horner, who passed early. Those two who are no longer with us, I think they do excellent composing, and did excellent composing, especially Ennio Morricone. Morricone, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. And also, there are people living who I think are really good, like James Newton Howard, who I've played a few times here. Some of his pieces, his musical compositions for movies like Grand Canyon, which I think is his best composing. But there you go. That was Jaws, the main theme. And as I said earlier, just because it's safe to go back into the water, it doesn't mean that you should. At least not immediately. You know, anyway. Oh, dear. I mean, if someone said, here's a drink, go ahead and drink it, would you go and drink it? It's a free drink. Here's a free... Would you go drink it? If it wasn't bottled, if it wasn't sealed, would you drink it? Here's a free drink. You wouldn't drink that, would you? Would you? And I mean drink as an alcoholic beverage. You wouldn't drink it. In fact, even if it wasn't an alcoholic beverage, right? And it didn't have that familiar scent, that whiff of alcohol. Well, I shouldn't say familiar. You know when something's alcoholic, it smells a certain way, right? You know that. But what if it was just a drink of water and it was there and the bartender said, drink it? Or someone in the bar or wherever it was. It doesn't have to be in a bar. Because, of course, we're not supposed to be indoors doing any drinking yet. Unless you're in England. Because you can drink now in England inside a bar. I believe. I think you can. But if someone tells you, drink this, would you drink it? So the CDC is telling, and this is a terrible analogy perhaps, but the CDC is telling people, take your mask off if you're fully vaccinated. Are you going to do it? With a virus that's we don't have a cure for, number one, with the variants all over the place, and there's variants here in the U.S., And with people knowing that some people are never going to get vaccinated. They're not going to get vaccinated at all. Really? You're going to just take off your mask? Even if you're fully vaccinated? Really? Is that what you're going to do? Well, it's a personal choice. Anyway, let's get back to... Here's some stories. Let's get to some stories here. Stories that you may have missed and that I may not have talked about. I know I didn't talk about. Mississippi officials, and this is from Blavity, Blavity, Blavity. Now, the Mississippi officials apologized for police-involved killings of 2 students on HBCU campus in 1970. Now, whether you were around in 1970 or not, but if you were around in 1970, you may, and in the U.S., you may have heard about this, about the violence by police, where 2 people were murdered at Jackson State University, which is an HBCU. It used to be known as Jackson State College back then, but Jackson State University, 51 years ago, this month. Philip Lafayette Gibbs, who was a Jackson State student, and a high school student named James Earl Green. Both of them were murdered by police. I mean, this was during an event honoring the class of 1970. So a really prestigious special event that was taking place. And this police come and murder them, shoot these 2 people dead. And people were protesting against racism and injustice and an injustice system here in the United States. May 15th, 1970, the police murdered these. I know the article says police used violence, and this is Blavity is a black publication, black owned. But I take issue with Thomas Casahun story because he writes it. I take issue with the phraseology. I am a stickler for language. I think it's not even being a stickler. I think it's very important that we understand the language we're speaking and reading. And yeah, I know this sounds like I'm being whatever it sounds like to you, but look, I'm not this exacting in everything, right? I mean, obviously when colloquialisms, when you're talking to people, when I talk to people, I'm not stopping them and saying, no, you're supposed to say this. That's not what I'm doing. I don't do that kind of thing. When it comes to critical thinking and analysis of news stories and things of that nature and things that you're reading in books or in this or in that or the other, it's a different ball game then. And so I don't care who writes it. If I write it, if you write it, if Tom Casahun writes it, I don't care who writes it. If Ernest Hemingway writes it, I'm going to be, or whomever, I'm going to be looking at what's going on there. We should be critical thinkers. We should be looking at language. And I know it's probably, oh God, don't do, that's so exhausting. No, it's about training your brain and using more than 8% of it. You've got linguists, Noam Chomsky. You've got etymologists. And I think this stuff's important. Malcolm X read every word out of it. That's not a fable. He actually did this. While he was in prison, he was called, I think, Detroit Red at the time. Or, as inmates called him, Satan. He read every single word of a dictionary. And in fact, not just read it, he wrote out every single word of the dictionary. Wrote every word. Studied the meaning of words, and look what he became. An incredible orator. And a critical thinker. I'm telling you, that makes a difference. Makes a difference. And that kind of time behind bars will do that to you, right? You can hone these skills. And I'm not saying you go to prison in order to hone your skills like that. Oh, I'm not advocating get thrown into prison so you can do that in the time when, You don't have to go to prison. But you can do that if you carve out some time. I mean, that may not be appealing, but it's about critical thinking is so important. So I wouldn't say that police used violence. I would say that police killed 2 people. Let's just get to the nub of it. Let's get to the point. Police killed 2 people on May 15th, 1970. That's how I write it. Right? Maybe I should rewrite the article and publish it myself. No, I won't do that. That's not right. While responding to protests against racial injustice. Well, again, the phraseology. Police killed 2 people at a racial injustice protest. And by the way, Philip Lafayette Gibbs was only 21. And James Earl Green was 17. Teenager. The mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, Chokwe Lumumba, had said that the cops, quote, unjustly gunned down 2 innocent young black men. That's exactly how I would have said it. That's how I would have written that. Of course, I know you're a journalist, Thomas Cossahern. You're not going to write it like that, but I would. Then it becomes less journalism and more something else. But come on, all the kind of things that the way the New York Times writes things, and you're going to be hearing about a story the way it's framed and the way it's juxtaposed that I find very interesting. You're going to hear about that in a minute. But Chokwe Lumumba, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, said officers, quote, unjustly gunned down 2 innocent young black men, terrorized and traumatized a community of black students, and committed one of the gravest sins in our city's history, end quote. Quote, this is Chokwe Lumumba speaking. He's the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. Quote, as James Baldwin once wrote, when we cannot tell the truth about our past, we become trapped in it, the mayor said. Quote, I believe as a city we must publicly atone for the sins of our past and proclaim a new identity of dignity, equity, and justice, end quote. I agree. I totally agree with Mayor Lumumba. Totally agree. And that is so true. You know I love to quote James Baldwin here. I've done it many a time. And I encourage you, please, to read James Baldwin's books. Start with The Fire Next Time. It is indispensable. Start there. Then read Notes from a Native Son. Those are the first 2. And then there's others. So many others. But those are the first 2 I would go with if I was reading Baldwin for the first time. James Baldwin was one of the top 5 intellectuals in the 20th century. I really think so. And he's not given his due. I'm telling you, I know some people will go, oh, no. James Baldwin is not given his due. He's not. He gets quoted. Yours truly quotes him here often, as you know. He gets feted and celebrated, and he'll, be seen in clips. He gets a great documentary on him, I Am Not Your Negro. But James Baldwin, we should be having a national freaking holiday here in the United States for James Baldwin. Or at least, if not a national holiday, there should be streets in this country named after him. I don't know if there are. Do you know if there? I haven't looked on Google or Google Maps. Is there a street in the United States named after James Baldwin? Is there a statue of James Baldwin anywhere? Maybe in the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History of African American History. Maybe there is there in D.C. that 3 or 4 level museum that has a waiting list of like a year or 2. But other than that, maybe, is there any statue of James Baldwin anywhere? James Baldwin should have monuments. There should be freaking monuments built of James freaking Baldwin. Honestly, James Arthur Baldwin should have monuments built after his name. Maya Angelou should have monuments built. Seriously. Toni Morrison. We should have freaking instead of freaking Robert E. Lee and all these Confederate and racist pieces of garbage who still, some of these statues are still up in some of these places. I mean, some of them are not, but some of them are still up. We should be having freaking Maya Angelou, Lorraine Hansberry. We should be having Nat freaking Turner. Where are the monuments for them? Where are the statues of them? We should be having them all over this country. Harriet Tubman. We should have them. Where's the statue? I don't want her on a $20 bill. I want her on a blooming statue. And I want streets and buildings. And I know there's probably some high schools named out. I want buildings. I want streets. I want freaking statues made of Harriet Tubman. Are you kidding me? Ida B. Wells and freaking... I want all of them. Put them up. Shit. Come on. Put them up. But you see, no, that's not going to... well, we should be absolutely pushing these locals and these... we should be pushing everyone in Congress and in local governments. And Ida B. Wells, are you kidding? Mary McLeod Bethune and... oh, come on. There's so many people. Shouldn't we have statues of Sandra Bland up? Tatiana Jefferson? Breonna Taylor? If we were a just society, we would have those statues up. By the way, if we were a just society, they'd still be all alive, wouldn't they? Wouldn't they now? George Floyd would still be here. Far less than the statues. We should have them still here with us. And by the way, I know I digress a little teeny weeny bit here. But in just 2.5 weeks' time, if not 3 weeks from now, 3 weeks or so from now, we are going to have the sentencing of Derek Chauvin. That is scheduled. And we will see on June 16th if he gets sentenced. Do not forget this. There's also, of course, in the interim been a move for a throwing out of this verdict. So we need to get real here about what's going on. And we need to be aware. We need to put pressure on Minnesota and on the city entities there and on the Hennepin County DA's office and the court and everything else. So that's one story from Blavity. That was dated, by the way, May 17th. The title, Mississippi officials apologize for police-involved killings of 2 students on HBCU campus in 1970. Well, 51 years later, the apology comes. It's better late than never. 400 people plus arrested in connection to the, I call it, terrorism of January the 6th, because that's what it was. It was a terrorist act. Over 400 people have been charged. This is arrested and charged. This is Daniela Wilder, again from Blavity, BLAVIT.com. Please familiarize yourself with Blavity. Great news stories that you don't get in a lot of other places. Please, this is really important. Daniela Wilder, May the 20th. That was yesterday, 2021. The headline, more than 400 people arrested in connection to Capitol insurrection. Again, I would call it terrorism. It's a terrorist act. Definitely. And you can look at the definition of terrorism if you wish to be so definitional. That was terrorism that happened on January the 6th, 2021. And I think some people have already filtered this out of their minds. But some of the kinds of things I was hearing on Joe Madison's radio show yesterday morning. Oh, a Capitol Hill police officer called in. And I'm going to warn you, I'm about to say something that is graphic. And it's going to take maybe 15 seconds here. So I'm going to give you 3 seconds to decide whether to close your ears or just turn off this podcast for a few seconds. It's going to be the next 10 seconds. A caller who is a police officer in the U.S. Capitol building talked to Joe Madison about seeing a man's eye. hanging out of its socket. Literally. A cop. These terrorists gouged his eye out. And it was literally out of its socket. Those of you who checked out for the last 10 or 15 seconds can return now. But this is the kind of violence that was going on. This is the untold story that, well, it was told on Joe Madison's show, as I just mentioned. But there's so much. I don't think we've got even close to the bottom of what happened on January 6th, 2021. We've not come close. There are so many untold stories in this terrorist attack. And no wonder people took their lives. After that particular graphic account that I just relayed to you, is there any wonder why people would take their lives? Two police officers that day took their lives. There's so much trauma. There's as this caller said, there are so many officers now, cops, dealing with this trauma of what they saw and processed. They're still trying to process it from what they saw nearly 5 months ago now. And the Republican Party is against having a bipartisan commission. They're against it. Oh, they don't want that. Oh, this is nothing. There were so many things that happened. People had guns. People had knives. People had twist ties. They had pipe bombs. They had bear spray and stun guns. I mean, this was a well orchestrated and when I say well, I do not mean that I'm celebrating it. I'm saying this was a planned. When I use the word well, I'm using it in the context of this was planned and orchestrated. It was thought out. This was not a riot. You see, and people are saying, riots are these spontaneous things. Uprisings are not spontaneous, in my view. They are things that are simmering. They've been going on for centuries. And then you see what happens in 1992 in Los Angeles. You see what happens. Because it wasn't just Rodney King and the white cops who didn't get any time for that, even though we all saw what they did to Rodney King. It was Latasha Harlins in the same month of March, I believe, or April of 1991, because, of course, in March of 1991, these white LA cops beat Rodney King within an inch of his life. And literally a few weeks after that, it was Latasha Harlins. It's been a number of things in Los Angeles forever, since the 60s. Since what? Since these days. And that's an uprising. It simmers, it grows, and boom. Riots are spontaneous. And there is a difference between a riot and an uprising. And this thing here on January 6th was no riot. It was not a riot. This was a well-orchestrated, planned, organized attack, terrorist attack. 9/11 was a well-organized attack, terrorist attack. One of these killed thousands of people. The other killed, 7, 8 people. I'm not comparing numbers. I'm just saying, two different events. One of them involved people who claimed that they cared about the country, but they don't care about America. They don't care about Americans. They don't care about America, meaning, let me rephrase this. The United States of America. They don't care about the US of A. They care about their own white identity and their belief that they've got to be violent. That's what this is about. It's about their wanting to exercise violence and be violent. They don't care about the flag. They were using the flag to kill police with. They were using the flag. If they cared about the United States, then why would they be attacking the United States Capitol building? Why would there be nooses being hung, in gallows being hung and put outside and put there with nooses dangling from them? Why are there gallows? They're using the instrumentalities that were used and still are used to lynch black folk in this country. And they brought those to the U.S. Capitol. Now, in a riot, no one has a spontaneous moment to bring a freaking gallows and a noose and put it there. That ain't what happens. That is not what happens in a riot. That is what, who put that, who made that noose? Who made that gallows? Who put that there? Come on, folks. This is planned. And I don't want to hear about, oh, this was an insurrection. This was a freaking terrorist attack. Even in an insurrection, they don't have these freaking nooses ready and a freaking gallows where the noose is hanging. This stuff was made. This stuff was produced. People printing up T-shirts with Camp Auschwitz on it. Oh, yeah, that's spontaneous. That's planned. It's planned. Oh, goodness me. Oh, but when it's white guys doing it, it's a riot. It's insurrection. We put these pretty sounding words like insurrection. I know insurrection as a word is not pretty and what it means ain't pretty. But, insurrection. It's not. It's a freaking terrorist attack is what it is. So, again, back to the story by Daniela Wilder. No, I don't mean to laugh because it's very serious. More than 400 people have been arrested and charged. These charges include obstruction of law enforcement, violence with a deadly weapon, assault, disorderly conduct, unlawful possession of firearms. This is according to the Washington Post. She's telling the Washington Post. Previous charges have included assault or impeding an officer with a deadly weapon. Oh, yeah, blue lives. Yeah. These people don't care about police. They don't care about them. These are all lies and excuses for them. They want violence. You had white women being charged, white men being charged. You have people screaming for Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to be hanged. I mean, come on. This is just so evil. This is just crazy. It's not even crazy. It's freaking evil. It really is evil. You've got boys and their fathers being charged. You've got a husband and wife and son being charged. I mean, what is this? You've got mothers, these white men, fathers being charged, and white female mothers. These are mothers of kids, fathers of kids being charged. Seriously? Come on now. Pauline Bauer, a resident of Kane, Pennsylvania, is within the group to be charged. She has been charged with the most serious count for obstructing Congress and disorderly conduct while participating with domestic terrorists and former, I'm not going to mention that word, Donald Trump supporters, because he's not that. He was never that. And you know the word I'm talking about. He was never that. He stole that office and he ain't an occupant of that office now. The mob vandalized the Capitol in an effort to impede the count of presidential votes for Joe Biden. In the video footage, Pauline Bauer can be heard screaming to bring out House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to be hanged. There you go. I'm telling you. And it's women who do this. Women are some of them. When it comes to other women, there are women on this planet who can be the most vicious, misogynistic, and violent. And Lord knows we know the men are. I'm telling you as well, there are some women who can be the most viciously violent and misogynistic people on the planet when it comes to other women. And I'm sure there were plenty of men shouting the same thing. It doesn't absolve the men. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Pauline Bauer is screaming this, shouting this, and it's heard on video. They're criminals. They need to hang. Bring her out. Oh, God, Jesus. These are not, again, it's not suitable for anybody to be doing this. These are people in their 40s and 50s and above. They know better. Or they pretend they don't. Or maybe they really are this freaking elementary and basic. They know better. Present in virtual court. This is Pauline Bauer. She wore a gray sweatshirt with the words "Old School Patriot" printed on the front, telling the judge she wanted to represent herself. Well, good luck with that. Pro se representation. Oh, good luck. She faces up to 20 years in prison if found guilty. William Blauser Jr., also from Pennsylvania, appeared for court on charges of disorderly conduct and illegally entering a restricted building. He was released on bond. Yeah, they get to go home. Released on bond. What was their bond is my question. Was it like $2.50? Because if it was one of us, if it was you or me, oh my goodness me, that bond would be $1 million, $2 billion, $2 gazillion. In New York, you get the idea. This is just more people. These people are smoking crack and marijuana and all this stuff. These people are just disgusting. These are people who have no life. And not only that, they have nothing going for them. And instead of blaming the very system, and Donald Trump is part of that system, that has absolutely shat on them, and tried to use black people as the reason why they're not doing well, or use brown people as the reason. Look at the fact that you have been failed and that you are a failure. They won't do that. They won't look at that because that hurts, right? To actually go deep and go introspective and deal with, well, maybe it's because I'm inadequate. Maybe it's because I can't deal. I don't know how to deal. I'm white and I don't know how to deal. And with prosperity in a country that actually exalts me and is all about me and all about what I do as a white male in particular, and maybe I can't hang with that. I hate to use that word, right? I mean, I can't deal with it. So I've got to now blame a black person, or the society gives me that person to blame, or that brown person because I think that brown person's taking my job. And it's a job I'd never do, mind you, but that brown person's taking it. It's like, that's the thinking. We've got to explode that thinking and end that thinking. And I guess we can't just end, but there's got to be counter-programming, unlearning. I don't want no stinking sensitivity training. We have to absolutely explode this kind of thinking. Sensitivity training. Give me a break. We need to throw history at people. We need to actually put it in their face. History. We need to start opening up this country and putting statues of Harriet Tubman up. We need to start doing that. And documentaries are a start, and books are really important. We've got to add to that. And I know museums do it, but we've really got to start building these things. We have to put pressure on local elected officials and on all kinds of elected officials. People are running for office next year. We need to be putting pressure on them. How can you have a United States of America and leave out 85 to 90% of the history of the country? How can you do that? And then in Texas, you're leaving out stuff, and you have these textbooks celebrating a racist and misogynist and a drug pusher like Rush Limbaugh. How is that happening? That's being taught to your kids. That's being taught to students. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Oh, this is a riot, huh? According to this is still the same story from Blavity. According to a spokesperson from the U.S. Department of Justice, more than 350 people were charged for entering or remaining in a restricted building, while 35 have been charged with entering the Capitol with a deadly weapon, and 30 others for conspiracy, according to CBS News. Prosecutors who have called the case unprecedented said they plan to charge at least 100 more people. There were thousands of people that day. You watched it, I watched it. Thousands of them. And they're planning to charge at least 100 more. And if it's been over 400, according to the story, that's at least 500 when you add this 100 more. And it says the FBI, it says it is continuing to search for more suspects, according to PolitiFact. Let me tell you something. They're going to be finding more people. This might take another 6 months to find all these other people. It might take another year to find them all. There you go with that story. Joe Biden, President Biden, signed a bill, I think it's an executive order bill. Actually, he signed it was the Asian hate crimes bill, wasn't it? The anti-Asian hate crimes bill. He signed that into law yesterday. Because I know they were supposed to be signed into law, and for some reason, I don't know why it took a few days or weeks, but it did. Although maybe it's because the House and Senate had voted on it. You know that 180 Republicans in the House voted, and there's all Republicans, of course, who voted against this. How can I know how they can. 180 Republicans voted against the anti-Asian hate crimes bill. 180. President Biden signed the bill. He signed the bill into law yesterday, and I think that's great. I think that's really good. Long overdue. We need to stop Asian hate. No uncertain terms. I actually was wearing a T-shirt from my store, by the way, from the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store at the-politicrat.myshopify.com, and I wore that with pride yesterday. It said "Stop Asian Hate" on it in Chinese characters, and people were looking at it, and and I really want you to go buy that shirt. Buy that shirt, please. It comes in different colors, but besides the point is that we need to send a message to people that this is not going to be accepted. This hatred and this violence against Asian people is not going to be accepted by us. And we're going to speak up against it. We're going to come out against it. And we are also going to stand up against it loudly and clearly and let Asian people know that we're not on the sidelines sitting here passively while this is going on. We need to raise our voices. And I know there'll be some people who are black who will say, well, they don't speak up for us. And yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe there are some times where some people who are Asian don't. But there's a load of Asian people I know who do. And it shouldn't have to be predicated on whether someone speaks up for us or not. It's got to be about who we are as people. Well, they don't stand up for Black Lives Matter. Well, maybe they don't. Maybe they do. But it shouldn't be predicated upon whether they do or don't. It should be predicated on what we do and who we are. And don't let what some other person does keep you from doing the right thing yourself. This can't be zero-sum game. This can't be anything like that. We have to use no matter who we are, we've got to speak out against this. Because an attack on one is an attack on all. And that's the thing. We need to be a better society. If we want to change the world, how are we going to change the world or change the country when we're not going to speak up and speak out against what's happening to Asian people in this country? All over here in San Francisco, you got left, right, and center And I'm not talking political spectrum, left, right, center. I'm talking about everywhere you turn, there's Asian people being attacked. It's at San Francisco, California. And it's happening all over this country. We've got to be better. We've got to be better. And I'm not going to sit here like some politician telling you, this isn't who we are. This is exactly who we bloomin' well are. Look at the Chinese Exclusion Act and tell me that this ain't who we are. Because this is damn well who we are. And if we don't want to be like this, then we better start opening our big mouths like I'm doing and like some of you are doing, and speak up and speak out against this violence against Asian people, this hatred of Asian people. We need to do that now and keep doing it, because I know it's not really in the news anymore. So people, you know how we are. Just because the media says something and puts it out there, that's how we respond to it. We don't think about it when it's not on the TV anymore. And I dare say that's why podcasts are important, because hopefully, including this one, we can focus on news that isn't being focused on in any wide breadth or swath like it would have been, say, 5-6 weeks ago when we had this terroristic violence and murder of Asian women, when we had and the media was reporting on it regularly, right? And everybody was posting hashtags. Well, I still do the hashtags, but I also, in addition to that, I speak to people with my masks on, 2 masks. I go to different communities. In everything else I do, I manage to do that. I manage to talk to people in varying communities, including the Asian community. And there are many different communities. I say the Asian community, but it's not just one. There are so many different Asian communities, so many different ones. But there are sections of that community that I've spoken to. I've spoken to people on a fairly regular basis. This is not something that we just sit on our hands about. Same thing with Black Lives Matter. You don't just sit here and, you live in a society where you've got cops murdering black people for fun. It's not fun, of course, but you know what I'm saying. We've got to do better. We've got to. Recent votes in the House, as I said, Joe Biden signed that bill. Oh, by the way, President Biden, can I just say something to you? This is really addressed to the U.S. Senate. When is the Senate gonna vote on this anti-lynching law? The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. When are they going to do that? Rand Paul's still holding that up, and Mitch McConnell's pretending he's got cotton wool in his ears. Is anybody talking to the majority leader, Chuck Schumer? I'm going to tweet him literally right after I finish this podcast today episode, because what's being done here? We should be striking this while the iron's hot. And I know you've got people like Joe Manchin. I don't want to do anything with the voting rights bill with John Lewis. I don't care. I don't want to get rid of the filibuster. And Kirsten Sinema. Senator Sinema. I want to bow and curtsy and stick my thumb down to $15 an hour wages in federal level. Yeah, that's fashionable. Let's just, I got my little book bag and I just bow and curtsy and I act like I'm a 15-year-old. No offense to 15-year-olds. That's the U.S. Senator you elected, Arizona. And I know she's a Democrat, but she's behaving like a juvenile delinquent. And so is Joe Manchin. It's just absolutely ridiculous. We should be primarying the out of these people. We should be primarying the fuck out of these people. Oh, but you'll risk losing your majority. What kind of majority do we have in the Senate? We can't even get a clear majority, a clear one. And they worked, and the voters of Georgia worked so hard. The organizers, like LaTosha Brown, like Cliff Albright, they worked so hard, and so many others that worked so hard in Georgia. Black Voters Matter. They worked so hard to get these 2 gentlemen in. Warnock and Ossoff worked so hard to get them in. And we still don't, I mean, we have, of course, Kamala Harris, the vice president, but we don't have we've got to be having a clear majority. Come on, we have to. This is outrageous, folks. It's outrageous. We really need to have a majority here. We do. Anyway, Tim Ryan, please run if you haven't announced already. I think you are going to. I hope you do. Run for Rob Portman's seat in Ohio, please. So, when is that? I want that any Emmett Till anti-lynching act signed. I really want that signed. The House passed it last year, for God's sakes. I mean, this is over a year now. What's going on here? Come on. This is really, it's absolutely disgraceful, if you ask me. It's absolutely disgraceful. And this is just crazy. Anyway, I want to rush really now to another thing before taking a quick break here. 2 days ago, the House did vote for this commission, 217 to 208. And of course, every one of the 208 no votes was Republican. Only 2 Republicans joined the 215 Democrats that voted yes. And 4 people did not vote at all. See how slender the majority is for the Democrats in the House? So if you take those 2 Republicans away who voted yes for this this bipartisan commission to investigate the terrorist attack on January 6th, do you know that it's only a 5-member majority for the Democrats in the House? It would only, and that's not including the 4 people who didn't vote. In fact, let's just kind of put the numbers where they should be, right? Let's put the numbers where they really should be. So if you had everybody who didn't vote, that's 4 politicians, and if you put everybody in their proper parties right now, this is what you would have in the House of Representatives as a makeup, right? Made up of 218 Democrats to 200, and this is just crazy, 211 Republicans. The majority that the Democrats have in the House is +7. The Democrats really have not done enough here. And I said this last November when the Democrats lost at least 20 seats to Republicans. You know, this moderate ass BS. Oh, we can't defund the police. You know, and all the Democrats did was apologize for being Democrats and begged to be Republicans. And the Republican voters said no thanks. And the Democratic voters didn't vote for him because they said, you do not represent me. And they didn't win enough Democratic votes anyway. And that's why Max Rose was running for mayor. Max Rose used to be a Democratic congressman, and I keep talking about this. Well, I talk about it from time to time. And he debated Nicole Malliotakis. I can't pronounce her last name. A Republican in New York, and they were on television. And I watched the whole thing. And that debate on New York 1 with Errol Morris moderating, I believe it was. Or it could have been Dean Meminger. Dean Meminger, who is at New York 1 still, I believe. Errol Morris has been there forever, too. Lewis Dodley's been there forever. Pat Kiernan's been there forever. They've all been there a long time, New York 1. It's a good station if you get to take a look at New York 1. NewYork1News.com, NY1 News, the number 1, NY1News.com. Check them out. But that debate, Nicole Malliotakis, again, I apologize, Representative Malliotakis, for mispronouncing your last name, but she ended up winning, as of course I've just called her representative. She actually beat Max Rose. But Max Rose was horrible, and she presented arguments that, although she is a Republican, didn't sound completely off the wall. And she was one of the first people to go up to President Biden after his joint address to Congress. I think it was earlier this month or last month. She was one of the first people to go up to him and talk to him. And she's running for re-election again, Obviously, it's every 2 years. Seems like just yesterday, but they're constantly dialing for dollars. This is the House all the time, dialing for dollars every 2 or 3 weeks, times a week. But that majority is slim. This is crazy. 218 to 211. Wow. 218 to 211. Now, if my math serves me, I think that's what, 429? Where are the other 6? Isn't it supposed to be 425, 430? Anyway, I forget. 435 members? Or is it 425? I don't know. 218 and 211. Last time I checked, that equaled 429. Aren't there a few missing here? Welcome back. Newspapers are really interesting, and I use that word interesting, and I try not to because I've decried it a lot. But newspapers are fascinating, let me put it that way, and very, very, strategic in the way they put stories on certain pages. I regularly read the Los Angeles Times, and I read the print version of it as it is sent electronically. And you get the actual pages laid out, and you've seen this if you've subscribed to the LA Times or any other thing. You've seen these where you can look at the literal pages as they would appear if you actually had the newspaper in your hand. And I'm a fan of it's ironic that I'm saying this because, if you have an iPad, or some kind of Kindle or anything, you can read books on it. And I hate that. I absolutely I despise having to do that. I don't do it. I used to, but I've had books on them. But I'm always a book person who likes to read books in my hand. The old-fashioned way, right? You look at the page, even some of these pages, if they're printed fresh, they're fresh new book, you crack open that book and the smell of the page, it's an immersive experience. You can get high off of you can get high off of that. Well, you get high off of reading. That's what stimulates the mind, right? Reading, and there's so many things that stimulate the mind. Reading is one of them. And reading from a real book, not audiobooks. I know some people, some of you, I would imagine, and you're so busy, so that's the only way you really can digest a book, is to have it in your ear to listen to it. That's not the same as reading. You are processing, and you're using your imagination, but it's not the same as reading. But if that's the only way you can do it, it's completely understood by yours truly. I just like to read books. I like to read a book and have it in my hands. And the LA Times, even though I don't have it in my hands, they put their pages together, like every newspaper does, quite strategically. They have editors, they have this, they have that, they have storyboarders, they have storyboard artists, they map things out, they have galleys, right? They have all that stuff. So in this edition, today's of the LA Times, on the front page, there's an article, Friday, May 21st, 2021. If you look at the front page of the Times, LA Times, as it looks in the actual print, on the front page at the bottom, they've got a story about, Latino men. There are a number of Latino men who don't want to get vaccinated. That's the one story, right, on that page. And there are other stories on the page. But one of them is and the Latinas, the general thrust of it is, the Latinas, yes, they're more apt to be fully vaccinated. And the Latinos, the men, there's some of them who don't really want to. So that's the positioning of that story on the front page. Then you go to A6, the 6th page of the Los Angeles Times. And at the top of the page, it says, 2 troubled migrant facilities to close. Underneath that, it says, subtitle, Homeland Chief denounces mistreatment in detention. Medical abuse is alleged at 1. Aha. Isn't that interesting? And the article goes on to say that there are 2 detention centers in Georgia that have closed now, because there have been some violence perpetrated against quote unquote migrant women. That's what they're called, migrant women. Not women, migrant women. You couldn't just say brown women, because that's what the majority of the women are. Therefore, in the case of the U.S., presumably Mexican, presumably, Latin American women. Oh, Latin American women. Where did I just mention a story in the same newspaper about Oh, yeah, page 1. About the one where the Latinas are more likely to be getting these vaccinations and Latinos are not? On page A6, 2 troubled migrant facilities to close, and women saying that they suffered medical abuse. Okay then. These stories aren't connected, are they now? See, everything's connected. I know some people don't believe that, but pretty much everything has a connective root. So a woman draws, and on this page, A6, a woman draws what happened to her. And she draws herself. You see a self-portrait of her. Tears down her eyes, down her face. A number stenciled on her breast. And then a drawing of her fallopian tubes and her womb. And the left fallopian tube is completely shredded off. It's not there. And then there's drops, it look like drops of blood. Sorry, apologies. I should have said that there's going to be a graphic description. But I don't find this personally graphic, but someone listening might. So I apologize. And then the fallopian tube on the right has an egg, an ovary attached to it. And then in the middle, in the womb area, there's a big question mark that she drew. Gosh, this drawing looks really good, by the way. I hate to sound really crude here, but I'm not trivializing this. There's a question mark in the womb, and then it says underneath, she's written the words, "What they did to me." And I'm telling you, this article goes on, and of course the Latino Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, directed the INS, or the ICE, to stop detaining immigrants at the Irwin County Detention Center in Georgia forthwith, as soon as possible. Well, it should be immediately, forthwith. And the article goes into detail some of the things that the women have been saying have been happening to him. And remember, if you cast your mind back about 6 to 8 months ago, 9 months ago, when there was a woman in Florida who was a doctor who said, there's all these procedures going on against black and brown women who are immigrants. Remember that from a few months? I forgot her first name was Dawn, I think. And she's a doctor, and she said, I'm speaking out because this is just ridiculous. So all this violence against black and brown women, right? And the article is titled "Too Troubled." Troubled is the very least of this. This is butchery and barbarism against women. This ain't troubled anything. This is a chop shop. This is what that is. And, again, the LA Times is going to put it the way it puts it. I am going to put it differently. And I dare say these particular women would put it very differently too. I think this drawing, this artist rendering, is really powerful. It puts it better than that headline does. And I know the headline writer is not Molly O'Toole, who wrote the article, but the headline writer gets put to shame here by that drawing. And above the drawing, above the woman who drew this drawing and who drew a picture of herself, self-portrait, and the fallopian tube, above it is the words liberty in big letters. I have to tell you, in fact, I'm going to post this. Because this is just, well, you just have to see this. But the point is that you have whistleblowers. I mean, this thing here is absolutely evil that's going on. And you've got kids still being taken. I know that the Biden administration says that's not going on, but there have been reports that that's still not being taken, but the kids still being detained, not taken. So I apologize. But there's still detentions. All of these children need to be released. And I get it. You've got to try to repatriate them with their parents, and that's very difficult. But they have got to be released from these places and put elsewhere until the finalization of reuniting happens, if it does. But this is so bad. These places have got to be closed. And these are people who are coming across the border and then they're being treated to these brutal This is what goes on. This goes back to the book Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington, where all of these experiments, I call them, they're not just experiments. This is violence against black folk, black women in particular, over hundreds of years. No anesthetic, the kind of gynecological things that were being done to black women. It would make your hair stand on end is the very least of it. It would make you retch. It truly would. No anesthetic, and the kinds of things that were being done to black women in this country. And then you follow the through line of that to now. Black women 3 times more likely to die in infant mortality rates than white women giving birth, I should say. And black women not being taken seriously when they say, look, I have a real problem here, and they're being told to go home. A black doctor I talked about, Dr. Susan Moore, a few months ago, and I had on Dr. Tyson Bell, I believe it. Yeah, it was Dr. Bell. Who was featured in Alex Gibney's documentary last year. And I talked to Dr. Bell. This is at the end of last year I talked to him. And we talked about Dr. Susan Moore, a black doctor. She Facebooked, basically did a diary of how her own colleagues in the medical profession let her die, because she would die just a few days after her last entry. And she had COVID or something like that, and they let her die. Oh, you're fine. You're okay. So do you understand what I'm talking about here? When I talk about this through line of the way black women have been absolutely assaulted and attacked and butchered. And then to know, again, you read this story that I just read from the LA Times, or parts of it, and you've got brown women, the same thing's been happening to them for centuries too. And you see it still happening. And I told you about the doctor, the black woman who's a doctor, a whistleblower who said last year, this is going on. At least 20 to 30 women who are black and brown have had this kind of treatment, this kind of violence against them, gynecological violence. Forced sterilizations, removal of the uterus, removal of ovaries and fallopian tubes. Widespread. Some people still do not know what exactly was done to them. This is in the LA Times today. But the juxtaposition of all of that with the front page, some Latino men don't want to get vaccinated. Well, maybe there's a freaking reason why they don't want to get vaccinated. Again, I want everyone to be vaccinated. Fully. But what I've just read out to you these last few minutes is a reason perhaps why some Latino men are hesitant. And that article talked about, well, social media may have got to them and maybe their peers. Maybe that's true. Maybe that is true. But whether it's social media or not, what's happening to these brown women, Latinas, what's going on with that, what's happening to them, what this government, the United States government, which Joe Biden has a seat at the head of in the executive branch, is doing, these ICE people are doing, is evil. It's absolutely, it's like a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. It really is a crime against humanity what's going on. It's murder. It's absolute violence. State violence. Dozens of immigrant women, which is just, look, if you're talking south of the border, you're talking about black and brown women, predominantly brown women. So listen to this. As of April 22nd, this is almost a month ago, the Urban County facility in Ocilla, Georgia, no longer held any immigrant women. Let's just move the word immigrant out of there and put brown women there. Brown. After dozens, listen to this, after dozens, not one, because one is one too many. Not two, because two is too many. Not three, because three is three too many. But dozens of women ultimately stepped forward to report unnecessary medical procedures conducted by a local gynecologist, which the women said were performed without their consent. Without their consent. According to Times reporting, LA Times reporting. Tie that back, if you can cast back in your mind, dear listener, to something I said here about 5 or 6 days ago, maybe a week or two ago, about the women at USC who settled this class action suit, and many of them were Asian women who had sued because this one gynecologist, Dr. whatever, George, whatever the hell his name is, absolutely raped these women while they were on the gynecological table and they were under some kind of anesthetic or whatever. I don't remember the exact facts, but the fact is that they were sexually abused, assaulted, violated. Violence against them while they were in these extremely vulnerable positions. And there was a class action suit and millions or billions of dollars were paid out. And at the time, the context of the story that I was telling was that there were individuals who were suing who were getting more than the class was doing. And that there was some animosity there. That's according to the article. And I think the animosity part to me is not the point. My point now in reframing and rather referencing that again is, this is freaking widespread. That's my point. This is going on so it's going on in places where you're supposed to be welcoming people. Lady Liberty has her torch up there, right? Emma Lazarus, give me your tired, your huddled, I can't remember it all. Yearning to be poor, you're tired, you're huddled, masses, yearning to breathe free, F-R-E-E. And then that's what we do. That's what this country does to brown women who come here. We just do these gynecological operations on them. Oh, actually, we actually butcher them. Right? Without their consent. Without consent, we just do what we want. But we care so much about women's rights, don't we? And yet we butcher these women. And then we don't ask them if we can butcher them. We just do it. And then these black women, for centuries, this has happened to us. Centuries. And then Asian women, USC, there's this piece of garbage out there who was violating the women there. wake up and you find this guy inside you. Like, what the hell is this? I know. Listen. I know this is triggering to people, and I should have done a better job here of warning people. And I dearly am sorry. I am talking about this, and it may sound like I'm talking about it very casually, but I honestly, I will step back, and I think what I need to do is have a separate episode on a lot of this stuff and what we can do to end all of this. Because I know this is profoundly upsetting. It's profoundly upsetting to me, and I know that it's profoundly upsetting to you. And people don't want to believe that this country does this. But it does. It does. And we cannot be better if we pretend that this country doesn't do these things to women. We can't. We cannot be better and want to make the country a better place and the world a better place if we don't both talk about this and then do something to end it and speak out against this butchery.
Let me just jump in, because obviously we're short on time. But, I mean, haven't we been here before? Jimmy Savile, Cliff Richard, and they tend to have a very public inquiry and then a very short apology, and then everyone seems to just quietly get on with things as they were. So what needs to change for this not to happen again?
Well, that's a very good and pointed question, Kimberly. And I've heard rumours and whispers, people who are interested in this subject at senior levels. People are talking now about a completely different setup for monitoring how the BBC goes about its journalism. At the moment, what a lot of people don't realise really is that in many ways the BBC is unaccountable. It's accountable to itself, and it has its complaints procedures.
I thought that all changed, and now it's not, self-regulating. Well,
now Ofcom is in overall control of the BBC, so it's the regulator. But the point about that is, it's very much a rear-view mirror operation, and Ofcom itself has proved itself to be not a very sharp critic of the BBC. It's gone along with many of the things, in my view, that it should not have gone along with as far as the BBC is concerned. But what it's being talked about now is something quite different. This would be an oversight panel which would be comprised of journalists who know what it's about.
So an independent editorial board. Had there been one, this wouldn't have happened.
Well, let's put it this way. You can never rule out, can you? You can't, and I can't, ever rule out that there won't be another rogue programme, that people won't get it wrong. Of course they will, because we're human beings and sometimes we get it wrong, sure. But what this incident shows is that the BBC was judge and jury of itself. There was nobody from outside who was privy to this knowledge, although the Mail on Sunday got a sniff of it, and the BBC said, no, that's not true, and the story died, and then the BBC covered it up for the next 20 years.
The BBC. I want to just talk about this for a few moments here. In England right now, there's a huge furor over the BBC, and rightly so. I have a huge furor over the BBC for different reasons, though. And those of you who may have been paying attention to the news in England know well that the big story there presently is about the Panorama program on BBC, and about the BBC itself, and about Martin Bashir, the journalist, and about the interview that he did on Panorama with Princess Diana in 1995. And the furor is around the revelation that has finally come out now that Martin Bashir, the journalist, faked documents, faked bank documents and financial statements and documents in order to get Princess Diana to speak to him. And he presented these documents to her brother, Lord Earl Spencer, who I actually like. I think he's again, I didn't know a whole lot about him. They're all, he's actually a part of the, he's a pretty, these are aristocrats. As was Diana. She was of them, but she was from them, but was not of them in the way, I don't know, you know what I mean? She was very much a woman of the people, even though she was born into aristocracy. But the point I'm making here is Earl Spencer, and I like Earl Spencer because he speaks his truth and he doesn't mince words. And I like people who are just direct. I may not always like what they have to say, just like you may not, but at least, they are being honest and true. And I'm not talking about people like you-know-who, initials DT, because that's just bullcrap and it's racist and it's just garbage. So I'm not talking about people like that. I am talking about Earl Spencer, Lord Spencer, who was presented these documents by Martin Bashir. And Martin Bashir successfully deceived, tricked them. And she was then, let me say this. Earl Spencer then introduced Martin Bashir to his sister, Princess Diana. And they had this Panorama interview, and it was a bombshell interview at the time. It sent, lots of a massive tidal wave through that British royal family that I am not a fan of. And it just led to a lot more trouble. The divorce came. The divorce is I think, happened by then, or just after. And away we go. Then 2 years later, Princess Diana was found dead in a tunnel in Paris. And yesterday, you had Prince William, the son, the eldest son of Princess Diana, speak out on camera, condemned the BBC, condemned Martin Bashir, and said, look, this is despicable, and, this interview basically resulted, he said, Prince William said that the interview resulted in her death, contributed to her death, made the relationship between her and Charles worse. Put it this way, Charles cheating on Diana made the relationship worse, not this friggin' interview. This interview was a piece of garbage anyway. Martin Bashir is a hit journalist, a hack journalist, a hit piece journalist. He's had a history of doing this, and he continues to get employed, and BBC even re-employed him in 2016. And by the way, as I said, I want to reiterate this. Charles cheating with Camilla Parker Bowles was what effed up the marriage. It was not a friggin' interview. That's beside the point. But far less of it for me to be raining on the parade of William, although Prince William, this is no parade for him. And the royals are notoriously quiet, and they do not speak out to the press very often. They do not, unless you're Harry, and Prince Harry, who has had it with the royal family. And remember, a few months ago, he and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, spoke to Oprah. They're good friends of Oprah. And they're good friends. And so I think they live near Oprah. Oprah has 1 million homes. she has anyway, but come on, what do you expect? She's a billionaire. She's not Jeff Bezos billionaire, but she's a billionaire. She's got enough money, and good for her. She's busted her behind for that. She didn't sit around being a venture capitalist who just sits there and just makes a phone call and then money comes. It makes money off of money. Oprah busted her behind. So, I got nothing against Oprah. Good for her. I got nothing against rich people in general. What I don't like is this mass distribution of wealth that goes only to them. That's what I have a problem with. While 98% of us, 99% of us are, just trying to keep our heads above the water, above the parapet here. But anyway, this is a whole nother story. I'm getting off the topic here. The thing is that Princess Diana came out in this interview and she just told everything. She told Bashir that what we all knew is that Camilla Parker Bowles and Prince Charles were having this affair. And basically that affair was going on and everyone in the royal family knew it. This affair was going on before Prince Charles, and forgive me the siren behind me here in the background. This was going on before Prince Charles even married Diana. He was having this affair before. I mean, the royal family, all of them knew this. This ain't some breaking news. This is not breaking news, dear listener. This is something that's been known for decades. Prince Charles had this affair with Camilla Parker Bowles for many a year. Before even, I wouldn't say many a year, but he had an affair with her and a relationship with her before he even got to court with Princess Diana, who was then known as Lady Diana Spencer at the time of the courtship. Then he married Diana, who became Diana, Princess of Wales, even while he was still having an affair. Not like, I say even, like that's like the first time a man has ever done that, right? But he married Diana while he was still screwing around with Camilla Parker Bowles. And the Queen knew this, the Queen Mother knew this, they all knew it. Philip knew it, now Philip is no longer here. All of them knew it. And they gave the marriage their royal blessing. And Diana was miserable from the start. She then soon found out what was going on. Pretty damn quickly. And it was a sham marriage. They had 2 children. I'm sorry to be so brutal, but it's the truth. It was a sham. Like lots of things happen between human beings that aren't real. Or that, are done for keeping up appearances. I'm being brutally honest. This is what happens. And 2 children were produced from that marriage. And, that was done. And now 2 children produced from that marriage are speaking up and out against the BBC, and rightfully so. Martin Bashir should never have another job in journalism. He's an absolute scumbucket. He did stuff to Michael Jackson. Why won't he apologize to Michael Jackson and his family? He apologized yesterday for forging documents. That's a crime. This guy really should be getting criminal charges thrown at him. And the BBC. I mean, what a disgrace. BBC, absolute disgrace. And now you got Boris Johnson talking about, we should be looking at the BBC. The BBC is not who you should be looking at. The BBC kisses your ring. They're the most favorable organization in the media to the Tories. What are you looking at? Other than to privatize them and get rid of their public funding? They're publicly funded, the BBC. They're not state-run. Because don't tell, they're state-run. They're not state-run. They're publicly funded by TV license money. It ain't, they're state-run. They're not Russia. They kiss the backsides of the Tories. So Tory-friendly, the BBC. Oh, my God. So that's my reason why I've got an issue with the BBC. They're so one-sided, and they're so Tory-friendly. And they're absolutely propagandists for them. Oh my God! But the reason why you hear some of these people talking about, we should take a closer look at the BBC, is because they're looking probably to friggin' privatize it or strip it of its public funding. I'm telling you, there's other motives here. The BBC has done stuff like this before. Look what it's done to Naga Munchetty. Now, those of you in the UK who are listening to me right now, particularly in England, who watch the breakfast show in the mornings on BBC television, you will know that Naga Munchetty, who is an Asian woman. Now in England, when we talk about Asian women, we're not talking necessarily about Chinese, Japanese, Korean. We're talking India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. That's what we mean by Asian in England. Although certainly Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Taiwanese are all included in that. But when that's talked about in England, usually we're referring to India, Bangladesh. We're talking about Pakistan. That's what we focus on. So Naga Munchetty in that context is an Asian woman from England. And she was given such a raw deal last year, the year before. This is last year. And the BBC was punishing her. I think they suspended her for some BS because she spoke out about something to do either with Black Lives Matter. I forget what the heck it was. And her colleague over there, Dan, her white male colleague, Dan, whatever his last name is, who used to do sports but now does and maybe he still does some sports, but now does co-hosting duties on the breakfast show, I think, BBC Breakfast. He said some stuff. He never got punished. But Naga Munchetty gets suspended or whatever it was. And then all the public pressure we put at the time on the BBC Director General, Mr. Tony Hall, Sir Tony Hall. And he reversed course and said, no, we apologize to Miss Munchetty. Naga Munchetty shouldn't have been suspended, or we shouldn't have done this, blah, 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 blah. And, etc., etc., etc. And that's because you and me put pressure on, in England, put pressure on the BBC. And the BBC, there's other issues with the BBC. The way and there was I remember I was in London 2 or 3 years ago, there was a BBC, I took photos of this and video the BBC protest. There were people protesting outside the BBC. And about the way the BBC treats them. So I didn't hear Boris Johnson back then in 2019. I know he was running for Conservative leadership, but I didn't hear anyone in the Tories talking about we should take a closer look at the BBC. It's now because the royal family has opened its mouth for the first time in 110 years. No, not quite. But you know what I mean. The British royals have kicked up a stink. And Prince William, who basically is going to be, second or third in line into the throne after Charles? Because after the Queen, it's going to be Prince Charles. After Charles, I think it's going to be William. I think. Or maybe not. I don't know. It could be someone else. But the point is that the royals have kicked up a stink. And now you're seeing, the Tories are looking. We should be looking into the BBC. And then the BBC's been doing this for decades with people. They've got some journalists on there that I wouldn't go anywhere near. Even in a hazmat suit, I wouldn't go anywhere near them. They're radioactive. I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't shake their hands. I certainly wouldn't shake their hands, especially not now. I wouldn't go anywhere near them. I'd wear a hazmat suit. I would sooner and I even then wouldn't go near them. I'm telling you, that BBC is a dirty ass place. And look, don't get me wrong. BBC programming, there's some really exceptional things on the BBC programming wise. It's the system and it's the people involved in it who run it from up top, and some of the scumbuckets that have since left, I'm not going to name his name because what good is that? But he's just a piece of garbage too. And he was on, I'll say this much, he was on Radio 4's Today program. And he was absolute, and everybody knows who I'm talking about, who's familiar with the Today Show on Radio 4. An absolute scumbucket. And he was around for so long, and he finally retired, I think earlier this year or last year. And good riddance. I mean, he was awful. This guy was absolutely awful. And let me tell you something else. I guarantee you there were some of his colleagues privately that were probably celebrating that he left. And maybe not. But there are people who absolutely were not losing any sleep over his departure. But the BBC has had a long history of this. And the Tories look the other way. Oh, but now, of Martin Bashir, because there's brown journalist. Martin Bashir, this brown journalist, maybe he sounds like he's from the Middle East with a last name like Bashir, so now we have to look into this. This happened 26 years ago. He forged these documents. Oh, but now, and the BBC gave him promotion. Now he's up. Yeah, it's just terrible. This is stuff. Again, the journalistic ethics here suck. And that's my thing, is that this is happening in organizations in the news all over the shop, whether it's in the US, the UK, whether it's in France, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in Israel, like Netanyahu. Give me a great headline. Write something good and I won't come down on your media organization with draconian measures. So write something good about me, because I start these conflicts in Gaza because I want to stay in power. So write something good about me, and that's all good, and maybe I'll stay in power longer, because I haven't been in power long enough. Because I've been 20 years in power? Basically I've been sniffing around the seat of power now, or I've been in power for 20 years, on and off, whatever. So what's another 20? That's like, no one's talking about the fact that this guy probably started this because he wanted to stay in power, and now all of a sudden no one's talking about Benny Gantz and the Blue and White Party anymore. It's all forgotten. It's because the ceasefire has started. That's the other thing, right? The ceasefire, and there's celebrations going on in Gaza. But we'll see how long this lasts. And the coverage has been so one-sided. It's been so one-sided and stilted in favor of Netanyahu and the government. And no one educates people about the differences. And no one educates people about the fact that there are Palestinian Jews. There are people who are Israeli, who are in Israel, who are Arab, who are Muslim. Then no one talks about the nuances and educates people about the complexities. There are Jewish people who are from Palestine, who are Palestinians. There are Arab people who are in Israel, who are Israeli. No one talks about the nuances. No one talks about that. They lump the news people. They lump all of this in as one versus the other, so you're not educated. Number one. Number two, you're being propagandized too. I talked about propaganda earlier this week. And number three, you're not being given the rounded picture, and you're not given the history the way you should be given it. So you come out there and it's all tribalism. I say death to tribalism. I know it's something that's part of us as human beings, but tribalism is horrible. And when I'm talking about tribalism, I'm not just talking about in the footballing sense where you're supporting Watford, or you're supporting Liverpool, or you're supporting, the New York Knicks, or you're supporting the Chicago Bears, or you're supporting whomever, if you're a sports fan. I'm talking about this kind of us versus them, and the kind of things that keep systems in place. Systems are quite happy to be laughing at you, and the richest are quite happy to be laughing at you when you're down there squabbling amongst yourselves, and they're just sitting there eating the popcorn. Talk about get your popcorn ready. It's a freaking festival of popcorn. You get drunk on popcorn. Don't you think that the richest get drunk on popcorn and caviar and assorted other alcohol, and not alcoholic popcorn? But you could say alcoholic popcorn, anyone? Get drunk on it, watching the folks on the lower ladders of the society arguing with each other, knowing comfortably at the top that they're never going to be threatened. And once you have this tribalism, the people in power smile and go, because they kiss themselves. And they know their position is never going to be threatened as long as you and you and you are over here arguing with each other over crumbs, instead of looking up at those who are depriving you of having a life that you could feel more comfortable living. But that's how the system thrives. When you've got the both sides coverage, when you've got the, this look at, this side versus that side. While the people on top are quite happy to look at the quarreling going on because, their position's never going to be threatened. The BBC, again, there's some good things about the BBC, and there are things about the BBC that are deplorable and dishonest. And, again, this is not the only organization that does this, but I'm talking about the BBC. So that's the organization I'm obviously focusing on. And I think right now, the BBC has more than not only a lot to answer for, it really does need to make some changes. But not scrapping its funding, not scrapping its public funding. That is not how, because I know that these Tories and Boris Johnson, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at trying to get any excuse to control the BBC, to further, to privatize it somehow or to change the control of it. Really. I'm telling you, that's what they're trying to do, folks. And this ain't about them caring about the royals so much. That's the pretext for doing what I think they've long wanted to do. They've certainly wanted to do it to Channel 4, which is a more independent-oriented and public station. Channel 4, very good station in England. My favorite channel, although I don't necessarily talk about Channel 4 a lot. They are just indispensable. They really are. But the Tories want to look at that too. They want to look at totally clamping down on these media organizations that do things that actually educate people and present perspectives that you do not get everywhere. And I'm telling you, that's what's going on here, folks. That's what's going on here. This isn't about the royals. It's a pretext to say, oh, now let's go after this and let's go after that. So much to talk about. So much. And I spent a lot of time on this episode talking about it. But I do want to thank you very much for your patience and indulging. And again, I want to apologize again. It's important that these issues are very important. And at the same time, it's important for me to remember that the context has to be right. And I will talk about things like I talked about in terms of what is happening to women, brown women in particular and black women in particular. And I do recognize, and I have to continue to tune this better, that there's got to be this has to be spoken about, but also there has to be a particular sensitivity to how it's spoken about. I mean, in the middle of a rant, if I just talk about this for 10 or 15 minutes, for example, it may sound a lot more trivial than I'm thinking. And how it comes across to you, dear listener, is important. So I am self-aware enough to realize and understand that how I'm talking about this news, particularly what I talked about at these detention centers, is as important as the fact that I am talking about it. Because there has to be a forum in which to talk about it and present it in the respectful way. And I don't think I've been disrespectful here. If I have, please, you will let me know at the email address politicratpod@gmail.com. You'll let me know. I know you will. But I just want to say that, I am cognizant of the framing, and I am cognizant of the graphic descriptions and aware that that these are things that need further discussion too, with guests, not only my passion and outrage about these things. I think that can also be supplemented with people who really will talk a lot more authoritatively and will educate you too. Not to say that I'm not educating people. I just think it's really important to have other voices who are much, much closer to these experiences, and also to what we can do to empower women, and also what we can do to end this violence against women, because this is clearly state-sanctioned violence. And it's one thing to sign into law a Violence Against Women Act or reauthorize it into law, President Biden and Congress. It's one thing to do that, but it's quite another thing when you deal with what is going on, which is violence against women in these detention centers. It's very, very clear. And I don't know if any reporter in the White House has posed this to President Biden, but if I were in the White House press corps, I would absolutely, that would be one of the two things I'd be posing to him, is what is being done to end these heinous and violent assaults on women with the medical profession doing this to them in these detention centers. What is being done to end that? That's what I'd be asking him. There's so much news. Oh my gosh, I spent so much time today. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your ear. Thank you for your time. And I hope you have a really good day. I really do hope that you are enjoying your day, wherever you are and whenever you're listening to this, whatever time zone you're in the world. Thank you for listening. And I hope you're having a good day. I hope you're having a good evening, good night, good morning, and a good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.